Hi, so I want to talk a little bit about Nightreign, and this isn't a review or an in-depth analysis. This is more of an overview of what I see as the most fundamental flaws with this game and the problems it may portend. And despite me bitching about it for however long this video is going to be, I did have fun with the game. You know, it's Elden Ring combat and more bosses to kill, so of course I had fun with the game. So, with that out of the way, let's get started, shall we? Soulsborne games are notoriously difficult. That's part of their identity. Difficult but fair. The games present you with challenges and it expects you to learn from them in order to overcome the difficulties. Soulsborne bosses are a game design philosophy unto themselves. They aren't checkpoints, they're roadblocks. You come up against a wall and the wall bashes your head in. So, you keep fighting that wall until you figure out the right way to bash your head into it. You die, you fight, you learn, you win. And, well, the roguelike dynamic of Nightreign works against that cornerstone of Soulsborne philosophy. Let's say you make it to the third day and you die to the Night Lord. That's fine. You don't know their attacks yet, some of them hit like a motherfucking truck. You're not expected to beat the Night Lords on your first try. But then, instead of fighting the boss again, in order to learn the boss fight, in order to learn from your mistakes, you have to start the whole expedition from day one, all over again. Elden Ring has sites of grace next to pretty much every boss fight, but older Soulsborne games had a short run back to those arenas. And Nightreign has a 30 minutes long walk back to the boss fight. And that's if you don't die and that's if you don't die before you even get there, or if your teammates don't just drop out in the middle of the run. And if you're dying on the first 2 days, you're not even guaranteed to fight the same boss that killed you in order to learn that boss fight. And yes, this is the same basic formula we see in other roguelikes. You find a boss, you die, you start another run and fight the boss again, rinse and repeat. But the way this formula was implemented here just isn't compatible with the Soulsborne philosophy. Whereas in Soulsborne games, you, the player, are expected to do most of the growth between fights. In most roguelikes, your character is expected to do most of that growth for you. Sure, even in roguelikes, you still need to learn the boss fight either way, but in the usual roguelike experience, your character grows in a manner that is distinctively tangible in order to give you the tools that you need to beat those bosses. In Hades, for instance, some of the upgrades you get from the Mirror of Night are game changers. Extra dodges, extra lives, huge health and damage bonuses. There is a curve in roguelikes that lets you grow artificially between runs at first, so then you can add the difficulty back into it after you've learned the game. And the counterpart to this curve in Nightreign would be the relics, but most of them are useless. Unless you get some very specific ones, they don't make enough of a difference. In Nightreign, you learn the game while trying to kill the first Night Lord. But after that, the first 2 days create an artificial difficulty for the boss that doesn't let you grow as a player the way Soulsborne bosses expect you to grow. Part of the learning process in Soulsborne games also comes down to choice and experimentation. Learning what works and what doesn't, and then using that knowledge and those tools in an informed, purposeful strategy. And the combination of roguelike randomness with the Fortnite-like shrinking map kinda nullifies that, right? Especially the shrinking map. You find different weapons and skills and spells all in different configurations, and you don't have the time to really experiment with any of them in a live combat scenario because you're always running for your goddamn life. And the focus here is the larger design philosophy, but I would also like to briefly mention some gripes I have with Nightreign because I'm a petty bitch, basically. Many bosses aren't optimized for their arenas. Big bosses have a tendency to go out into the night, for instance. Morgoth, foul tarnished, can also invade you in the middle of a boss fight, and even if the field boss is the one that kills you, Morgoth still gives you his debuff. There's a bunch of other stuff too, but that's the kind of stuff that could be easily ironed out, I think, with updates. And individually, they're not much of a problem, but there's just so many of them. And to be clear, I'm not saying Soulsborne and roguelikes are fundamentally incompatible. You can, for sure, make a Soulsborne roguelike. And I, for one, would be very interested in seeing that. We already had a glimpse of what that could look like with the Chalice dungeons, right? But Nightreign just isn't it. It can be fun, sure, but the way I see it, this is a poor roguelike, and this isn't a Soulsborne game at all, even if it looks and fights like one. And then there's the lore. For anybody who isn't aware of it, there was an interview with the director of Nightreign where he said, "We'd like fans to think of Nightreign as an Elden Ring spin-off, first and foremost. The story is completely separate and parallel to the world of Elden Rings. If you had to tie it in some way, we had the events of the Shattering in the original game. After the events of the Shattering, this is a completely separate branch of the Elden Ring story. We understand that there's a great deal of emotional attachment to the story of Elden Ring that a lot of the fans have, so we didn't want to encroach on that too much. We wanted it to coexist with the existing story, and for players both familiar and new to enjoy both of these stories separately." In Japanese, he was even more categorical, in my opinion. They're doing their very best to officially state that Nightreign isn't canon, without actually saying the words Nightreign isn't canon. We're not just players, we're consumers. And for a test run spin-off, Saying that it isn't canon is like saying, please don't buy our game. And the people funding this project wouldn't really be too happy about the devs saying that, right? So they spin out the PR version of that. The base game and the DLC are a full package. They give us everything we need to make sense of the lore, and bringing Nightreign into it just gets in the way. But not everybody will have read this interview, and even among the people who have read the interview, there's still disagreement. There's still a lot of people out there who choose to believe Nightreign is canon to the base game. And we'll come back to this canon not canon subject at the end of the video, but even just within the confines of Nightreign, I gotta say, I don't like how they handled lore hunting in this game, which isn't really that surprising coming from a game director that specializes in combat design, which isn't to say he couldn't have cared more. Sorry for the nod, yes. Or even that he should, but it is still a lackluster aspect of the game that makes it even less of a Soulsborne experience than before. And I'm not saying the lore is bad, okay, the story, I'm saying the lore hunting is bad. This game just doesn't seem to care about that at all. Like, I don't know, for example, what's up with the skins? You know, lore-wise, what's up with that? Who's selling that equipment? Why is it tied to defeating Hailstar? I don't know if that's how you pronounce his name. Why are they tied to specific characters? What's up with the Dawn and Darkness armor sets? Did we get together and decide to get matching outfits for no goddamn reason? It's cute, you know, like, but, oh, why does the Guardian become a different bird when wearing the Darkness armor? Like, there's no lore considerations to that aspect of the game. What's up with the remembrances? In Dark Souls and Sekiro, that was a very specific thing. It had its own lore explanations and implications, especially in Sekiro. I don't know if I've ever talked about that. Like the Sekiro main game, the main quest line of Sekiro, I think is in and of itself a remembrance that future Sekiro is reliving, but that's neither here nor there. Here, well, is the journal magical? That's gotta be magic, right? What's up with that? The game doesn't seem to care about explaining that. What about faction soldiers? You know? Why are there fucking red main encampments around? Their world effectively ended. There are no demigods to follow. What the hell is up with those factions? That's kind of the same scenario we saw in the Ringed City, right? With the Lothric soldiers squatting in the post-apocalyptic remains of their kingdom. But Dark Souls took it seriously. There was a whole recontextualization of the lore and the characters to accommodate for the changing circumstances. In Nightreign, they're just flipping assets. They're just flipping assets here. People talk about Soulsborne games reusing assets, but they never do it like willy-nilly, you know? There's always a lot of care put into it. Nightreign, on the other hand, just doesn't seem to care. And that's a problem, right? If they don't care about the lore hunting of their own game, then why should I care about it? Maybe there is an internally consistent lore to be found here, but given this level of care or lack thereof, I'm just not interested in looking for it. Nightreign seems a lot more interested in just flat out telling us a chunk of the story and then taking the mystery box approach to the rest of it, in my personal opinion. And that's fine, it's their game, they can do it any way they like it, but we should take it for what it is, which is to say, this isn't canon. And again, in my personal opinion, this isn't even a Soulsborne experience. It's more of a Souls-like. And now we get to the crux of the whole thing. When I first heard about an Elden Ring roguelike spin-off, the first question that came to my mind was, whose project is this? It didn't sound like something FromSoft would be making. It sounded more like something executives would tell them to make. And I hadn't played the game yet, but it sounded more like a corporate mandate than an earnest artistic project to me, and there's the timing too, like, why now? Well, because it's Elden Ring, basically. Soulsborne games used to be a more niche thing, but base game Elden Ring sold more than the whole base game Dark Souls trilogy combined. Elden Ring went truly financially mainstream. FromSoftware games aren't a side project anymore, they're cash cows. Everybody wants to be a Souls-like now, but these guys, these executives, have the real thing in their back pocket. We don't know how that's going to play out yet, but they're cash cows and the executives are going to milk that shit. And I think Nightreign is the first step in that direction. Soulsborne games have like a legacy player base. The ones who played and supported these games up to Elden Ring, and this player base is less likely to accept current monetization practices being introduced to FromSoft games. But Elden Ring brought an influx of new players that don't have the same relationship with these games, that wouldn't have the same whiplash from seeing a loot box, for instance, in a FromSoft title. So, at least for now, the executives need to bridge that gap, and that's where Nightreign comes in. In that same interview I mentioned before, Nightreign was specifically stated to not be a live service type of game, but it sure as hell looks like it's following the live service playbook to me, Purchasable cosmetic items, multiple currencies, gameplay items bought with premium currency. The random relics from the small jar shop are effectively loot boxes. This is just the usual predatory monetization framework, only without the real life currency element for now. Everdark bosses are on a rotation, which fits the FOMO model of live service games. They quote-unquote force you to not only play the game, but play it now. You gotta play it now, and to come back to it later. You have to keep coming back to it, not necessarily because of the fun, but because you might miss out on the rewards, right? We see that in a lot of live service games out there. And Everdark bosses were released post-release, but they aren't a DLC per se. These are arguably base game features that should have been there from the start. So releasing them this way fits the roadmap strategy of live service games that release incomplete, unfinished products that are supposed to become a full experience later on, if the companies don't pull the plug on the project in the meantime. There was also that fucking undisclosed DLC that you got from buying more expensive bundles, right? Additional DLC that includes additional Nightfarers and bosses. Really? First, asking people to pay for content without actually specifying the contents of that content is kinda shitty, you know? You're asking for real money for this. You should provide more information about it. Like, technically, they could just give you new schemes and call them new Nightfarers, right? And second, like, really? Really? What? Are you going to release new classes and bosses that I'm gonna have to grind for? Like, maybe pay for it with premium currency? Or maybe I could have just paid hard code cash to skip the line, right? What's up with that? This is the framework for that time saver microtransaction bullshit we see in, like, I don't know, Assassin's Creed games or something, which brings us back to how Nightreign is structured. Everything in Nightreign seems designed to waste your fucking time. You can't learn the boss. You have to play 30 minutes of grind before you get to try it again. You can't go back to the round table hold. You have to go back to the main menu and log back in and go into the game and restart the expedition and skip the cutscene and stare at the loading screen, even if you're playing solo. You have to navigate multiple menus to do your shit. You have to go here to buy the glorified loot boxes, then you have to go there to sell the useless trinkets you get. Then you have to come back here to buy more loot boxes, rinse and repeat. The Everdark bosses compound with what I was talking about before, that they don't let you learn the bosses properly the way Soulsborne bosses expect you to, because it's on a rotation now. If you can only play on the weekend, you get maybe 1 or 2 days to try it. Next week, that boss is gone. If you didn't learn it, tough luck. You gotta wait for the rotation to come back. Is that how that's going to work? This is an environment ripe for time savers, right? And all those other kind of microtransactions they have out there, especially considering there's already grinding content in the game. There's already stuff you kind of have to grind for, right? A game like this could feasibly add microtransactions that start you on day 2 with X levels and gear, for instance. Save your time. Play less. They could add souls bucks that let you buy shit from the item shop. The current premium currency even lets you bypass some of the randomness of the roguelike structure already. Isn't this supposed to be a roguelike? Isn't the randomness part of the deal? By letting you start the Shifting Earth event of your choice, for instance? For a price, of course. Jesus fucking Christ. As fun as it may be, as much as you may like it, Nightreign is a Trojan fucking horse. The artists that make these games may care about their work, but their bosses only care about our money. And the artists don't own the IPs, the companies do. Nightreign is the cheapest, lowest effort, asset flippiest way to introduce a predatory monetization framework to official FromSoftware Soulsborne games. Nightreign isn't the end goal. This isn't what other games are doing yet. Nightreign is just the first step. This is foreshadow, a fucking prophecy, an omen of things to come. If the industry has taught us anything, it's that the industry will do whatever the fuck it wants. Sometimes it's faster, sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's in your face, sometimes they put a pretty bow on it. Sometimes they have to start with Nightreign and Duskbloods before they start releasing mobile card games and battle royales with battle passes and souls bucks. But eventually, they always do whatever the fuck they want. And what they want is all of our fucking money. And that, finally, brings us to what the fuck do we do about this shit? Well, while I think it's important for us to be aware of such practices so that we can inform others and so that we can keep ourselves from being fully exploited rather than just partly exploited, I also think there's nothing we can do to actually stop this kind of stuff from happening, unfortunately. Voting with our wallets doesn't work, review bombing doesn't work, screaming on social media doesn't work. Everything we can do to try helps, and we should do it. But given the level of agency we have at the moment, it ultimately doesn't work. You know, we gotta keep trying so we can get to the point where it starts to work, but right now it just doesn't. So, given this is a lore channel, I want to talk about the lore again. I want to talk about the lore again, if you didn't hear that, because my voice is dying. Nightreign and Duskbloods are just the beginning. And there's already division in the community regarding whether they're canon to the base game or not. And as we move forward, what happens as they continue to release spin-offs? What happens as the executives continue to encroach in the creative process? What happens when they release a Soulsborne Battle Royale headed by a known FromSoftware developer, where Gehrman can shoot an AR-15 at Millennia or something? There will never be consensus in the community. That's basically impossible, but I'm not talking to the community at large right now, I'm talking to you, my audience. There's fewer of you than before, but for those who stuck around, first of all, thank you very much. Your presence and your support means a lot to me. And, well, I want you to think about how you're going to handle the lore going forward. You know, where will you stand about this stuff? I don't know how bad it's going to get. No, maybe they'll encroach on the base games, maybe not. Maybe just be spin-offs here and there. Or I don't know how long it's going to take. But this is the direction I think things are headed. So personally, I'm drawing a line in the sand here. Even if I eventually cover the lore of Nightreign, as far as this channel is concerned, Nightreign's lore isn't canon when it comes to the base game. Okay? I'm sorry if this isn't what you wanted from me, but I think we all need to be more discerning about our sources of information in general, not just with lore hunting. And this is tiny part of that effort, but yeah, this is the position I'm taking. This has been an official communication from Harumi Rose. Thank you very much for your time. Stay safe and good night.